Hello, everyone. It's Steve with Aptera Owners Club. Today on X, Aptera put out this, what do we call it, a tweet, that fossil fuel subsidies globally topped $7 trillion in 2022 IMF estimates. The U.S. alone provides over $20 billion per year in direct subsidies, tax breaks, and support for fossil fuels. We cost less without help, so why does gas still need a handout? This is a point, actually, that I always bring up when people bemoan the EV tax credits, and they're always like, "Why are we picking winners and losers? Let the market decide. Why are we subsidizing EVs?" And most of these people don't realize the extent to which gas and fossil fuels are subsidized. These are. Let me kind of explain these numbers to you because these numbers seem huge. All right, so this is this is where they're getting this information from, most likely. They said conservative estimates put U.S. direct subsidies to the fossil fuel industry at roughly $20 billion per year, with 20% going at coal and 80% to natural gas and crude oil. So this 20% does not mean gasoline. $20 billion is not going to subsidize gasoline. It's going to subsidize all fossil fuels, which is what they said in their tweet, fossil fuel subsidies, although in the end they kind of talk about gas. So what form do these come in? So there's direct subsidies. There's this is in the U.S. tax code. They have intangible drilling cost deduction. So this allows them to deduct a majority of their costs from drilling the oil. So drilling new wells is essentially kind of free for them. And then percentage depletion. This is an accounting method that works much like depreciation. And so it's a special provision for fossil fuel industries that lets them do depreciation of their assets. And this generates about $13 billion over the next 10 years. Then there's clean coal investment, non-conventional fuel tax credit. And then they have these other things that are called last in, first out accounting. This accounting allows oil and gas companies to sell the fuel most recently added to the reserves first, as opposed to selling the older reserves first. This allows most expensive reserves to be sold first, reducing the value of their inventory for taxation purposes. Foreign tax credits, master limited partnerships, direct manufacturing deduction. So there's a whole plethora of these, and it ends up being at about $20 billion a year. Now, those are what we call explicit subsidies. That means we're explicitly giving them tax breaks or credits for the production. This $7 trillion number, so here it is from the IMF blog. This was written in 2023, and it says fossil fuel subsidies surged to a record $7 trillion. And so these fossil fuel subsidies are continuing to increase. They're not decreasing. They're not sunsetting them. They're increasing year on year. So if you look at this graph, you'll see there's something called explicit subsidies and implicit subsidies. And you'll see that implicit subsidies are the larger amount. So explicit subsidies are the things that we just mentioned, all these tax breaks and grants and things like that allow them to pay less taxes and to do things basically for free. And implicit subsidies are basically things that they are not being charged for, which arguably they should be charged for. So what we're talking about is fossil fuel drilling and burning has a lot of what we call negative externalities. And this is something that I covered in a video a while back where we talked about externalities and free market capitalism. So an externality is a cost or a benefit caused by an economic actor that is not suffered by the same actor. So two people are having a transaction. So like someone's drilling oil and someone is buying oil. And so those people are entering a free market transaction. However, the process of drilling and manufacturing and burning oil affects those that are not involved in this. So the people who live next to the well or the refinery, or the people that live in cities that have to breathe the air of all the vehicles burning air, even if they don't themselves own a vehicle, they are suffering the cost of this. And so that cost is not being borne out or being priced in the market. So that's what they're saying is, if you take into consideration the health costs and the cost in pollution and congestion and lost wages um, from the health detriments of fossil fuels, then if you price that in, and this is obviously not as easy to measure, and people have different models, and they're going to disagree on what the model should include. But there is obviously some level of damage that this is doing that is not being priced in, and they're saying by their estimates it's going to be about $6 trillion. So there's $1.3 trillion in 2022 of explicit subsidies. These are things you can easily measure. They're very knowable. And there's explicit subsidies that measure 7 trillion. Now, by this metric in the United States, we have $20 billion in explicit subsidies and about $700 billion in implicit subsidies. So that's where they get those numbers from. Now, do these oil companies need these subsidies to stay afloat? Because we do need fuel, we do need fossil fuels at this point. I mean, the world runs mainly on this stuff. So these companies need to function, and if they cannot function profitably, perhaps we do need to subsidize them. But that is not the case. These companies make ridiculous profits. They make profits of anywhere from $10 to $30 billion a year. And these are the private companies. That's not including, and this happened while oil companies are raking record profits under Joe Biden. This happens under any administration. They try to phase out some of these subsidies under Biden. They were not successful. So here they are. If you look at the largest oil company in the world, that's Saudi Aramco, they posted probably $100 billion in profits in 1 year. So these subsidies are not really necessary. And what this allows them to do is it actually subsidizes down the price of gasoline. So gasoline, if you priced in the externalities, should cost more than it does now. I know most people feel like gasoline is way too expensive, but if gasoline users and producers needed to pay for the health costs of the air pollution and water pollution and other things that are caused by the use of fossil fuels, the price would be much, much higher. Now, in comparison, let's look at subsidies to electric vehicles, because this is from the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank, and they basically, I read this article, and it's not very well referenced. They said $22 billion in government handouts, and they have this as their reference. When you go to this, it's a New York Post article. It says nothing about $22 billion, but there are subsidies, obviously, to electric vehicles. There's a $7,500 tax credit that accounts for close to $2 billion a year in credits. And then if you take, this number is probably increasing what they call, they're probably trying to price in a bunch of other things like mining credits and other stuff. That would be the most generous way of handling it. That's $22 billion. So if you look at what we would say direct subsidies to EVs, that would be probably $2 to $3 billion a year, as opposed to $20 billion a year for fossil fuels. And then if you look at like implicit subsidies, that for EVs would be about $22 billion a year versus about $700 billion a year. So when people talk about, do we want free markets and the market to decide, and why are we subsidizing EVs, just remind them that the subsidies to fossil fuels is over 10 times greater by any measure, by either the direct measure or the indirect measure or the explicit measure or the implicit measure. So I'm kind of glad that Aptera brought this out in their post. And I think this is something that people who want these subsidies to go away, just, I think, like, make all subsidies go away then. And price in the cost of fossil fuels. Stop the implicit subsidies. Price in the cost of the pollution and the healthcare costs and the costs to lost wages and children's health and long-term mental development. All these things. Price all that in. If that happens, you'll see that fossil fuels will cost way more, and EVs without any subsidy will become much cheaper. And so, yeah, I thought it was a great point, and it's something that I've always thought about, and I'm glad this kind of gave me an opportunity to talk about it. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.